us, which they probably will very soon. But I'm here to welcome you. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Rooted Voices Sacred Bones, the podcast that we enjoy greatly because we dip into your world and offer you depth and insight and perspectives that you may not otherwise get. I'm here with my hosts, Joanne Sprott and Jillian Starman. I'm Jean Hamilton-Fford, and today Joanne has our topic. So, Joanne, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean. Our topic is curiosity.
That's curious.
So, this will be a wonderful time to think about what makes people curious, but more importantly, what makes you curious, and how that works its way into your life in terms of what you end up doing. Because usually, curious leads to moving towards something else, right? That we're curious about.
Pardon me.
And then we decide whether we want to go through with it or not. So it's part of our decision making process, whether it's reading more pages of a book or going into a totally new career, it doesn't matter. So I like to look at some of the big aspects of it and some of the smaller aspects of it and see if y'all enjoy it. That's a thought too. The first thing I want to do is ask you, Jillian, if you remember a moment in childhood or young adulthood where curiosity basically took over and you went into something you had never thought about doing before.
Interesting question. Because as a young child, I moved around a lot, not just around the block, around the state. I moved continents.
God.
And so there was always a curiosity around the new environment. Um, and wherever I moved to, people were curious about me because I was different. Um, but yeah, and I think sometimes that curiosity is more of a thing in younger kids. And I use this sometimes in some of my leadership development programs where, it's like go back to being a 2-year-old and ask why, why. And you know how when little kids are around you and they constantly do that and it drives you crazy. But then um we kind of mold that out of them and get them to stop asking why. And as we grow older, I think we lose that just naturally because, people, but then how do you know new things if you're not curious? And so I think yeah, it's just an interesting thing. I think the being curious as an adult to me has a really a strong line connection to change and change management,
Okay.
because if you're stuck in a rut and you want to do things different, you have to be curious about what you want to do and why you want to do it. So it does kind of bring you back into your childhood and, when was I curious and why aren't I curious anymore?
Right, right. Yeah. Why do we? Well, we'll get to kind of why we might lose some of that as time goes by.
No.
Yes, Jean. So, what do you remember, if anything, about being curious as a child as being the same or different from being a young adult and what it might have motivated you to do?
Nothing. I don't remember my childhood too well, as you well know.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
understand.
I only have kind of young adult stuff to go on. And
That's fine.
frankly, I'm just going to say curiosity shakes hands with uncertainty. And curiosity
Mm.
shakes hands with, I don't know. And curiosity shakes hands with, I might be wrong here. And, all of those things can be very uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And it's one reason I think that curiosity loses its grip on us as we get a bit older, because as we get older, a lot of times we're not allowed to be wrong. We're not supposed to be wrong. We're always supposed to know what we're talking about. It's so I don't know is kind of out of the equation. And all
Hmm.
that uncertainty breeds is anxiety for a lot of adults. And we need to get comfortable with curiosity again so we can get comfortable with all of those things again and give ourselves permission to say, I'm not really sure I know what I'm doing here. Let me get curious about that. Or,
Ah,
I could be wrong. Could be wrong. That's kind of interesting. Or, I'm not feeling very comfortable with this. I wonder what it is that's keeping me from being so comfortable here because nothing to be afraid of.
right.
So, even in my youth, it was on the farm and always out with the horses and always because I rode bareback. So it was always improvising. I had to find places because it got to a point where I couldn't jump from the ground onto the horse. So I always had to look for stumps or trees I could climb on to get on the horseback.
Mm.
And it was fashioning bridles or something out of whatever I could find because I couldn't always put my hands on what I needed. So it was interesting. And I was always curious about what things I could do and what things, even if I didn't think I could do it, I could manage.
Okay.
So I think curiosity as we get older gets a bad rap because it leads us down the rabbit holes of being very uncomfortable. And really, if we tie it to
Hmm.
wonder and being interested, I think it might shift that dynamic a bit.
Yeah, I think you've hit on, Jean, the thing that keeps people from following through on their curiosity is often um, fear of consequences of some sort, which they may have gotten partly from trying out new things when they were very young and getting shut down in some way, or just trying out new things when they were young and touching the stove and finding out that's not a good idea.
Well, curiosity can be expensive,
Yeah, true. Oh, good point.
right?
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So it's expensive in the fact that, like you said, touching a stove can injure you. That's kind of expensive. Or
Illnesses.
even having to reinvent, redo, relearn,
Mm.
whatever, that can be expensive, not just in time, but sometimes in money. But it all is about being curious enough and brave enough to take that risk and that chance and say, oof, let's find out.
Right. And there are some people who they need the curiosity just to feel alive. Um, my husband's like that. He really, it's hard for him to get his energy up to get going on things unless he has a really strong curiosity to go outside and mess with his bonsai trees or whatever he's working on. And if he doesn't have anything like that, it's hard for him to find the energy to do just regular stuff. And so I think curiosity is an important tool for managing our energy in our daily experiences, for example. And so I think some people get the idea that curiosity is only for kids or only for um, artists or writers or people like that. And it's really something that we use every single day, just like what you were talking about, Jean. You're in the kitchen, should you touch the stove or not? Or are we trying a new recipe today?
Or
It can
could I
be
cut my hair any differently?
it's a let's try it. Yay. Let's try something different.
Yeah.
And but there's also got to be getting over the fear.
Hmm.
And in order to, you have to get over the hump of the fear in order to try out that new thing and take whatever the consequences are, whether it's
Yeah, it'll grow
super
back.
short, yeah, it'll grow back. But there you go. Always an option.
Always.
Sometimes you have to be courageous in order to
Ah,
be curious because it
there you
takes
go.
courage to take a step out of either the known or the familiar, back to, it's going to change something if you do something different. And if you're okay with that, but yeah, sometimes it
Mhm.
does. and people will shy away from it because back to what Jean was saying, it's not comfortable sometimes to step out into something that's unknown because
Right.
you don't have that adventurous spirit. You want to know from day to day that this is going to be so.
Yeah, just so you know, I don't know what the back looks like, so I'm taking a risk.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's okay.
I'm teasing y'all. It's all good,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
I'm air
exactly.
conditioned.
Yes, that's true, especially where you are there in the London area. Europe doesn't have a whole lot of air conditioning, so one has to find more traditional ways to stay cool. So you're using your curiosity. Well, how is this going to look in the mirror when I'm done? Well, let's find out. And then you take the chance. There's that feeling of sort of partly reluctance and partly go for it to see what happens, and then we go and do whatever it is and see what happens. That's what I like about it, is it's such an active thing in a way. Curiosity is something that calls on us to move,
Or
inner,
do
outer. Go ahead, Jean.
better do. It causes us to do, not
To do.
necessarily move, but to do,
To
to
do,
bring
yeah,
it, to
exactly.
be different, to take that risk, to take that chance.
Right.
And it requires some movement, but it doesn't necessarily require us. I can be curious sitting in my chair all day. I don't need to move anywhere. I just
Right, a good
do,
point. Do
right?
something. Yes, good point.
Hmm.
But Jillian, you were talking earlier about, you mentioned when you first answered my first question, you said something about people were curious about you because you were different and talked differently or something like that. So how did you feel about being the object of curiosity?
I think when you're that young, it really doesn't impact you as much as when you get older.
Ah,
Uh,
okay.
I think it just becomes part of the whole package that, they're curious about me, I'm curious about them. But I noticed the older I got and I continued to move, I learned how to assimilate faster.
Hmm.
So learn how to talk like them, look like them, sound like them. Then that way, no, I'm no longer different. Because
Right.
as you become, teenagers, being different is not always a good thing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and
And
and so
then when you get older, Jillian, you become this woman of mystery, and it's a
and I don't
wonderful
care.
thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
So I think
Once the
one of the
yeah.
things that I learned to do, and I always joke about this in a way, is I became a chameleon
Mhm.
Mm,
because chameleons take on the color of the background. And so how do
Mhm.
you do that, and that I think to some degree, I think Jean was talking about this. You talked about uncertainty, but I think that curiosity is the opposite. And it's, you want to be certain. It's back to, I'm not putting my foot down unless I know there's a solid surface under it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
hmm.
curiosity isn't that. It's like, oh, let's go step in the pond and see how
Yeah,
deep it is. Is
yeah,
it
right.
2 inches
Right,
deep?
right.
Is it 2 feet deep? Or, where are
Right.
we? So,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I sympathize, Jillian, with your position being the object of curiosity as you moved around. Um, didn't do continents when I was a kid. Did that later, but definitely moved around a lot as a child in the United States, and had that same feeling of I got to decide now. Do I want to conform to my peers here or not? Especially in the teen years, it was kind of tough to do that because they were very easy to judge out of their own fear and that kind of thing. So yeah, so do we assimilate or do we not assimilate and take whatever the consequences are to their curiosity, which turns into judgment because they're afraid of people who are different from them.
Mhm.
And I don't know, there are certain games that I would play, not so much assimilation, but just being as charming as possible to kind of disarm people who were going to be quick to say, you're different, I'm curious, but I'm going to judge that, whatever that is. And sometimes I could disarm people and get them to release their judgment. But that was one of the methods that I tried. So
Mm.
Well, I
I
think
could
in
only assimilate for so long before I just couldn't do it anymore.
yeah, I had that feeling
Yeah,
too.
and it was kind of a after a while it became I don't even know the reason I'm doing it. So I'm
Right.
just not going to do it anymore.
but to kind of answer to what Joanne was
Sorry.
talking about, in that
You were.
we do business with people that we know, like, and trust. And how do you get to know people? It's about having conversations and being curious about them.
There you go. Yeah.
What do we have in common? What are our differences? And as adults, I think it's important that that curiosity gets behind that, getting to know people.
Hmm.
And sometimes, if we only want to get to know people that are like us, then that becomes very cliquish.
It does.
um, versus,
Yep.
are we getting to know people who are different from us? And, are we being curious about how that complements how we could work together? Because one of my biggest things that I love to do, as I mentioned before, is collaboration. So, why would I
Oh,
collaborate with somebody who's just like me? Because, one of us isn't really necessary. So, but if I,
Jillian, are you
but if I
saying are you saying that we're not like each other?
we have enough in common, but we
yes.
still have things that we are very different in. And I think
Yep.
that's where that lovely synergy comes together. So
Me too. Besides that, we all like to have fun, and that's good. We
we
can have a
do.
good laugh.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And let's see. I'm trying to think of what other things.
I
Oh,
got
do you
one.
think? Okay, go ahead.
If you want it, I got one.
Okay.
Right. So, where curiosity is concerned, do you think there's anything that should just not, we shouldn't be curious about? Is there anything you're so sure about in your life that you've totally decided you know everything you need to know and you're no longer curious about it?
Short answer is no.
Yeah, the short answer is no over here too.
Because no matter what we know, there's always something new or different to know about that. So, I mean, you could
Hmm.
pick any topic you want and you think you know everything, but there's either a new technology that has changed something, or there's a new person that you can get to know that changes it.
Hmm.
There's new
So,
information that's being brought up. So there's always something changing. So you never really know everything about a topic or person.
well, I'm not talking about topics or persons. I'm talking about your life. Is there anything in your life you stop questioning? Your life. Because you think you know everything you need to know about it and there's nothing more you need to know.
I wish.
Yeah.
Nope.
Because I think sometimes when we are comfortable,
Mhm.
curiosity wanes and
Hmm.
we no longer question and we become quite complacent.
Mm.
And I think that's the where I was going with that. Because, in our own lives, if we were just to be sitting in a room by ourselves, no one, no thing around to bother us, and we were just reflecting on our life as it is right there in the moment, it makes you wonder, is there anything in my life that I know enough about that I don't need to be curious about it anymore? I don't need to question it. It's fine.
I think there are some people who do that, and I think that's
Hmm.
where that, differences comes into it. Because they are very comfortable with where they're at and what they're doing, and they don't see any need to change, and that's okay. But that won't work for me because of who I am and what I'm doing.
Hmm.
So it's like, how often but there again, how often do you do that review? Do you do it monthly? Do you do it quarterly? Do you do it annually? Do you wait for a 10-year anniversary? I mean, when do you stop and look at, where am I? Why am I here? What should I be doing? Whatever the question is, to be
You
curious
know,
about.
well, I think sometimes it takes something in our life to disrupt us enough to look. Whether that's a death in the family, an illness,
Mm.
losing a home because of financial problems, whatever, having our business go down the toilet, and having to lay people off or get rid of clients because we can no longer do our business or becoming disabled. All of those things,
Mm.
and even more things, right, can really disrupt things enough to make you stop.
Yep, there are lots of reasons that people might stop. It can be psychological reasons, it can be physical reasons, um, and then the remedy perhaps is to let go of our own self-judgment in those cases, to leave an opening to go in a different direction that works with who we are at the time. And that means letting go of a lot of other stuff that we were attached to before. And
Mm,
that's a big deal for all of us humans inside, because we do like to be comfortable.
mm.
And when something changes without our permission, we're
Out of our
going to
control.
out of our control, we're going to um, resist and scream at the sky, probably, at least for some period of time. And it, it's, but I think it's curiosity that sometimes helps pull us out of that, in the sense of changing the direction. I feel like I'm looking at things in a certain direction, and then I go look in another direction. Wait a minute, what's over there? And
Squirrel.
it's a question. Yeah, squirrel. It's a question of allowing ourselves. Well, that's something that I believe in all the time now. I didn't always used to. That there are always options. As long as you're alive and you're not going to get out of here alive, as long as you're alive, there are always options.
I
I
think there's always
think
curiosity.
real, yeah,
But
Yeah,
that you can shift into a different direction in some way or another. Might need help.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
saying you have to do it all by yourself,
yeah.
but I think I think human experience. It's very, very difficult to get yourself in a position that where you're devoid of any option at all. I'm not saying
So
it's impossible, but
I just want to say I'm going to take the blue pill. All right.
okay,
And, not matrix stuff, I promise. I'm
okay,
just letting folks know this is not from the matrix, but it is a blue pill,
okay.
right? And I don't want anybody freaking out, but it's just an antibiotic for my toe because I've got an
Oh,
infected toe.
you're a little toe. Oh God,
so
that's
while
right.
she's doing that, I just want to tap into what you were talking about, Joanne, in that you talk about, having curiosity, but is there such a thing as unproductive curiosity? Can you be curious about too many things and too many squirrels and
Oh, right. There's too many
not
squirrels.
really, not really knowing what deserves your attention?
Well, that's why one of my questions here that I came up with before I started was
Oh,
whether whether curiosity was a concept of focus or distraction, or maybe both. So,
well, is it similar to analysis paralysis,
Mm.
right?
uh,
Because
mm,
that can be the same thing. And
mm,
really, I daydreaming, curiosity, kind of, yeah, maybe a bit
uh,
nebulous, but still tied because you can be curious while you're daydreaming.
okay,
There's
yeah,
so many
true.
ways to employ curiosity, and I think it depends a lot on where you are at the time, that particular moment, because sometimes we do it to escape. You know,
Mm,
uh, curiosity is one of the greatest things a writer can ever employ because it helps take them in so many different directions, and they get to choose then which one they're going
hmm.
to go down, right? Curiosity is great if you're going to paint. Curiosity is great if you're going to garden. Do you know how many times when I was growing up on the farm, we would mom or dad would say, go out and plant the green beans. And we would go out and we would look and we'd think, not sure what this seed is, but I'll go ahead and plant it. Right? And you never really knew what was going to come up because didn't even have the packets marked half the time. They would say, go get the
Oh,
packets. They're over here. They're on that. It's like, right, okay. And sometimes it wouldn't turn out to be what we thought it would. But it's still curious, isn't it?
yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's kind of how it works. What do kids do, right? This is part of being a kid, isn't it? But I don't really know that it is a distraction unless you choose it to be that,
Ah, okay. All right.
right? Just as it can be a focus as long as you choose it and you know what you're doing with it. I think that's what
Hmm.
the difference is knowing what you're doing with it, and being willing to contain it a little bit where you need to. I think.
Right. Right. Because if you have
I don't know.
multiple curiosities, say multiple things or activities that you're interested in,
Curious.
one could get we could get excuse me.
I said I'm curious about it. I don't really know.
But you can end up getting lost in the curiosity
Oh,
about multiple things, and it then becomes a distraction because you haven't focused in on one thing to do anything with it, uh, and so that could be maybe a negative aspect of curiosity. I don't know. Aside from burning your hands on the stove, that's a negative aspect. Because
you
I mean,
learn
we
quick.
take a risk. We take a risk when we get curious, don't we?
Always. But we take
Always.
a risk every single day.
We do.
That's true.
It's no different, is it?
Nope,
I
just getting
mean,
out of bed.
I think curiosity could be kind of labeled as fluid creativity.
Oh, that is a great way of looking at it.
So
Fluid
if you're going to
creativity.
employ curiosity, you're going to employ fluid creativity because it is a very fluid thing, curiosity.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And it is always a creative process of some sort.
Right.
And it may
Well,
not seem that way.
even being part of this podcast, it's like, what are we doing next? Who's going to be bringing what topic to the table?
Right. Yeah, we don't
How's
decide.
this going
We
to
don't.
work together?
Yeah, we don't have a 5-year plan of topics
No,
for
we
the
do not.
for the podcast. It doesn't
Nope.
work that way.
We just have infinity within each of us so we can draw
That's right.
on whatever we want to,
We
right?
have creative curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
But
one of the oh, go ahead, Jean.
curiosity, if curiosity had a voice,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
What do you think it'd be asking you right now?
I always come up with the
Hmm.
Simon Sinek why. Why are you doing this?
Oh, wise. Stop it.
Yeah.
See, and that's how we're different, Jean.
Stop
Why?
it.
Well, I have a very strong interest in the universe and how it works, astrophysically and spiritually or energetically probably be
Metaphysically.
metaphysically. Ooh, very good, thank you. um, and I have a strong feeling about how it works. I'm curious to know more and to verify some of the things that I know. No, I don't need to verify some of the things I know. I know them because I know them. But I'm fascinated by scientists out on the edge of the knowledge base about the universe because they're quite different from the scientists who are doing more practical things. A lot of times they tend to have a more open minds, and they will say, even if they're quote experts unquote, I don't know. When you ask them a
Mhm.
question about how, is the universe going to expand faster and faster forever and ever or not? Nope, we don't know. We're
Hey,
trying to figure it out.
I think
So,
every 2-year-old on the planet is a scientist. Because
exactly.
every 2-year-old you ask a question to, the first thing they say is, I don't know.
That's right. They're not afraid to say I don't know, and I think that's really important because because as adults we tend to get into a place where we think we need to defend our expertise, and then we'll get attached to a hypothesis, which is not the same thing as proof that something exists, and
Well,
then tweak our research so that it fits the hypothesis instead of the other way around. So
see,
I
Joanne,
think, yeah,
this is where you and I differ because everything's a fiction.
well, that's also true.
So I
You
don't
can
ever
you
think
can
there's
go that
any
direction.
real fact.
I know there aren't any real facts. But we have a game that we play with the scientific method that provides a basis for some kind of larger community agreement on how things work. I'll put it that way.
Consensus.
Yes.
Yes, build consensus.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah, or it could all be an illusion. We don't know.
Okay.
We're going by our senses. No, I'm totally.
I'm okay with that.
Your position. I get your position. We could go
Jillian.
fully. Yeah, we
You're
could
like,
go
oh
fully.
no.
We could go fully into talking about the Matrix if you wanted
That's
to.
not. That's not. I just
Let's
took the
not do
blue
that.
pill, so we're not gonna go there.
Woo.
Yeah.
Okay. But what
So
I
I'm
like,
curious
yeah,
though about
yeah.
the difference between when where's the boundary
Mm.
between curiosity and intrusion?
I'm not snapping to what that means. What do
Okay.
you mean by
Well,
intrusion?
well, Jillian, I could be all curious about you, couldn't I? But if I start asking you 30 questions or 90 questions because I'm curious, is that curiosity or intrusion?
Well,
Oh,
there,
that kind of thing.
yeah, because it's like if you're asking me certain questions that I'm open to sharing, I
Mm.
think there are people that when you talk about boundaries, what's the boundary between
Mm.
what I'm willing to share about my general life or something that's more personal?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm and there again, I'm more guarded about certain things or I'm more open to share. And I think there again, that comes down to personality. um and we've learned from childhood, if something hurts, guess what, I'm not going back in that direction, and no matter what it is. So you can start being curious about something, but if somebody's been curious about that with me before, I have shared information and it's been used against me in a negative manner, I'm not sharing that again.
Once
And
bitten, twice shy.
exactly. And I think
Mm.
as an adult, we've learned over time not to do certain things or not to respond to certain things. And so,
Mm-hmm.
we tend to place judgment on things. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean because, and I'm making this up, Joanne, so don't take offense. If Joanne
No.
asked me something and it hurt me, and then Jean asked me the same thing, I have a choice to make as to whether I believe that Jean's going to respond the same way Joanne did. And
Oh,
so it becomes very judgmental in what that intrusion piece is all about.
Mm-hmm. But
hmm.
it's not just about personal space. I mean, intrusion can be
Oh.
about if I were to ask you about your business,
Right.
or if I wanted to ask Joanne about the universe, but I wanted to do it in a way that I wanted to mine information from her to use it for myself. Is
Mm.
that intrusion or is that curiosity? Does it depend upon my motivation?
Well, how are we going to know what your motivation is if you don't share that?
Probably because of the questions I ask.
There could be hints to that. I'm trying to decide if I would care.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sorry. uh,
I like that.
because people will come with all kinds of different motivations from all kinds of places. Although I do have a very strong belief that there are exactly two motivational emotions, and everything else is a derivative of one of those two, and that's love and fear.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
if you're trying to quote mine information from me, I will probably be able to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I would care about it or not, I don't know. Lots and lots of people, for instance, like me, read tarot cards. I'm not going to spend all my time worrying about whether somebody's trying to mine me for information about my technique so they can, quote, steal it, unquote, or not. I'm me. This is my energy. Nobody else has this specific energetic frequency in this specific space and time. And I'm going to come across giving the same tarot reading differently than somebody else, so I don't care. I don't know if
And
there are
I'd
situations
love
with
to come up
business
with
and
a
stuff.
new word other than and care,
Yeah.
because I say that a lot and it's like it feels wrong, but I don't care. I don't mind. I just it sounds very caustic when I say I
Ah,
don't care, but it
I
really
don't
doesn't
know.
matter. I mean, we've learned,
There you go.
we've gotten to this age where we've learned that
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter. People are going to do with information what they're going to do with it.
Right.
And what other people think or say kind of, rolls off my back, as
It's
it didn't
irrelevant, is
used to
it?
do.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. Nothing really matters in the end, does it?
No,
Right?
not in the
Because
long run.
even if they do, I mean, if it is intrusive, you can always say, I'm not really comfortable answering that question,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? I'm not really comfortable sharing that information with you. And kind of set that boundary, right? You can do that.
Yeah.
But, nothing really matters. It doesn't really matter if they get the information from you or some other source or whatever, because whatever their intention is, whatever their motivation is, it's their stuff, isn't it?
Yep.
But there is this business about curiosity and intrusion. You can take
Hmm.
curiosity too far, I think, sometimes. And it may be quite innocent, and probably is until you get so far in and you think, ooh, I should maybe not do that anymore. Let me just back up. I'll just take a
Back up.
step
Yeah.
back.
Oh, I've definitely felt like backing up, and I have to admit, now that you've mentioned this, I think I would feel seriously put upon if the information I was being, quote, mined for led to my being arbitrarily hauled off the street and arrested or something and my rights taken away. I think that would be a problem
Mm.
for me if that was the result of somebody pressing me for information. Fortunately,
Well,
I've never been in that situation, but yeah.
yeah, but I think also, the interpretation we apply to what we hear can sometimes be misdirected or
That's
misunderstood.
true. Yeah, yeah, misunderstood. Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's why I'm
yeah.
cautious about drawing that conclusion,
Hmm.
although I have a
But
pretty good intuitive thing.
is there a cultural
Oh,
element to this? When I
oh,
came across here from the States, every time I'd encounter someone and start talking, they would say, "Oh, where are you from? How long you been there? How long you been here? What are you here for? Who'd you, all
oh,
90, it was like bam, 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 bam. And it was finally, I just got kind of like, just stop, you know,
wow. Okay. They were
yeah.
very curious about you.
But, I think it was also because people like to know who is in their vicinity, who's in their
Right, yeah.
sphere.
Hmm.
Um, but at the time, it felt very intrusive.
Hmm.
And they were probably
Interesting.
just curious.
Yeah, probably, but that's definitely a situation I ran into to a certain degree when I lived in the UK also.
Hmm.
It's not
Hmm.
just relevant to the UK either. Um, Spent some time in Italy, lots of curiosity there, and a different way of treating women that I wasn't used to.
Hmm.
That was a little bit more old fashioned, shall we say. So that was something that I kind of had to decide whether I wanted to make a fuss about or anything like that. So it was there were delicacies that had to be attended to because
Yes,
of the difference
indeed.
in culture and stuff. So and that's how we adapt in relating to different groups of people when we move around that much. And Jillian, you've been in other countries and continents and stuff too. So there's even if it's even if it's technically the same language. Like if you went to Australia, you would find that there are lots of words that are used quite differently there than here, and you might be offended by them here, but it's not a big deal over there, or something along those lines.
I came across that a
So,
lot. Yes. But as I'm
so,
listening to you two to talk, I think there's one thing that came up in the curiosity piece, is that how respectful are we with, when Jean, you were talking
oh,
about it, how
good.
respectful are you with your curiosity? And it's
Hmm.
a lot like when we're growing up, we're taught how to walk and talk, but we're very, very, very seldom taught how to listen. And we're
Ah,
also
mm.
not taught how to be respectful a lot of times. And I think that's missing in a lot of societies today. So we can say, yes, let's be curious, but can we be respectfully curious?
Well, I think that's a really good distinction. I know even in the States, been married multiple times. I will tell you now, there are some places in the
Hmm.
States where curiosity is really, you don't want to be curious. Just keep your eyes down, keep your ears open, keep
Right.
your
Mm-hmm.
distance,
Yep.
right? Um, I encountered that. And it does change things. And it really is about the relationship sometimes between people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes, curiosity with respect, I think, is important, and really
Mm.
understand if it's okay to be curious, because sometimes it isn't. It isn't safe sometimes to be curious.
That can definitely be true. As again, to go back to the very beginning, there are consequences to curiosity, both positive and potentially negative, in all kinds of cases, but especially
Mhm.
in terms of human relationships.
Yeah.
We're all coming at a given relationship with another person with all sorts of stuff and experiences in our own heads that we're coming to it with, and so we're going to respond differently depending on
Hmm.
what that luggage is that we're carrying with us. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
But overall, I really think that curiosity can be a wonderful way to expand ourselves emotionally and intellectually into areas that might be of interest to us. And a lot of people don't follow their curiosity because they feel called back by all kinds of different rules. And I favor people exploring their curiosity a lot more than they probably allow themselves to,
Yes. Well, I would favor that
as a
too.
whole. Yeah.
Yeah. But there are some, I'm completely cognizant that there are some situations where being curious can be quite dangerous. And
Oh,
if
yes,
you're in a
absolutely.
situation like
Mm.
that, you'll
Yeah.
understand it wholeheartedly. You
Yeah.
know,
I think
I
that
feel
ties back into your
people.
question around culture, and does culture
Right.
influence
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
curiosity?
Right.
And I think definitely it does in different places around the
Right.
world.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I think what I'm alluding to is things like coercive control and domestic violence and abuse
Oh,
and
yes.
all of that.
Absolutely.
You're not allowed to be curious
Oh, no.
in those situations. So
That's right.
it can be scary, but if you can retain just a residual amount of curiosity as to what can I do, what can I plan, when can I get out of this? Sometimes
Right.
that's all you need, that little seed for
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. That's right.
Well,
So we
that's
can use
that's
it.
not a
Yeah.
good note to end on.
Yeah, we're running out of time now.
We are running out of time and
Okay.
we got to scoot, but you know what?
Yeah.
It's been really good, I think, to talk about curiosity. Have you guys had some interesting things from it
Yeah.
And I
to take
think
away?
and I think going back to kind of what we started on this was, as young children, they are rewarded for asking questions.
Yes, we're not going
But
to
as a
say the we're not going to say the word.
but as adults, we're rewarded more for knowing the answers.
We are.
Oh, good point. Yeah. So sometimes maybe we need to get back to thinking a little tiny bit more like we did when we
Yep.
were kids in order to insert some new energy into what we're doing and what we're planning to do. Good point.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say
Yes.
the word.
I know. Oh my goodness. You wanted to, I could tell. And I was like, oh no, oh, don't do it. Anyway, we'll talk about that sometime because it's fun. But, ladies, thank you so much. I hope whoever is watching and listening, you have had a good amount of fun with us. And also, you've taken away something that will serve you because that's what we're here for. We want to unlock avenues you may not otherwise have availability to. So we hope we were able to serve you with some compassion and grace and some information. And thank you so very much for being here. Thank you, Jillian and Joanne, also for being here. It's always a delight. And we will see you
Yep.
all next week. Bye for now.
Bye.